Quick thing before I begin the video, I'm putting a link in the description for my online store, so if there's something cool you like for instance, this is my favorite. I tested that sticker, it's in there. There's other stuff too, but anyway, enjoy the video.
Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. Today's video is a quick recap of what happened last week on Bob's Dyno. I'll tell you some of the stuff that's learned. I do plan to do a further in-depth videos as far as the technical parts on different aspects of what happened with each engine to explain why certain things did what it did and whatnot. And hopefully we'll get some solutions, or at least get some ideas anyway. But that'll be later videos. Those take longer to do. Obviously, I don't have a lot of time for editing, so even this video you're watching, I'm just limited on time. As soon as I got back Sunday night, and Monday was instantly, I got to make money, so working away. A lot of stuff to catch up on. But anyway, here's the recap. And there's some behind the scenes I kind of need to tell you, so this will explain a lot of why we did what we did. So when I got there, they had already had the 406. So this is one of the automotive adventures with Austin. He had done this 406, and it's for a guy named Dave. He should have been in this thumbnail picture. We went out to eat at Watts. Fantastic place. But the idea was to help him get back into racing, and it did get him excited. But this 406 was a stock block. It had a 4 eyebrow relief piston. I've only found that out when we changed heads, for the record. And then I think it had a scat cast steel crankshaft. It's not forged rods though. And anyway, before I'd gotten there, they'd initially dynoed it with a set of Jegs heads, completely stock. And then they sent them to me. I ported them, and I had a CNC program made from that port, and that's what's here now. So they are available for sale. And now I could say they're proven out because we've tested it quite a bit. Because when I say I've tested it, I've tested it. But anyway, he'd switched to the heads before I got there, and it gained, so they were like 580, it went to 507. So that's about a 20 horsepower gain. And I should point this out, it really depends on the order in which things get put on how much it gains for each thing. For instance, the heads only gain 20 horsepower. But when they switch the cam, it gains like 50. If you would put the cam in first, then switch the heads, the bigger gain might have been gained on the heads. So the order in which things get put in kind of changes how much it gains. Regardless, it gained doing nothing else. But they put the heads on, and then they switched to a single, it was at 507. They then switched to a single plane, I think it made 530 to 540. Then they put in a bigger cam from Urson, just a shelf one, not custom at all. And at that point, they'd gotten to 594 when I showed up that day, which would be last Monday. And we were tinkering with that. The idea was we're going to get above it. I didn't bring a whole lot of stuff to test with that. What we did do is we changed to the 1.6 rocker, and that's how, I should say they were at 574. We switched to the 1.6 rockers, we got to 594. The next thing I brought, and it's the only thing I brought for these heads, and it'll make better sense later, was the Victor Jr. manifold that I'd used for my 406 dyno testing. In majority of the combinations, it's the best. Don't ask me why. It's an old one. I compared it to a new one. It just makes more power. It flat out does. When we put that on, it made 1 more horsepower, but it made dramatically more torque, especially in the lower range. So that's what was happening with the 406. We then changed heads. So this plays a part. We changed the heads to, and I brought 2 sets of ProMax heads. Both have my port design in them, but they're different port designs. So this might get confusing, so bear with me. We have one that's a 235. You can actually order that from ProMax right now. However, I'd prefer if you order from me, and here's the reason why. When you get them from ProMax, oftentimes they don't have a back cut on the valves. Yes, it does affect power. So when you get them from me, I tear them apart. Sometimes I redo the valve job. I definitely put a back cut on it and that stuff. So yes, I charge more, but that's a 235 you can get from ProMax. This other one's a 232. It's only sold by me. It's a different program. They're similar. They flow similar. They got the same minimum cross-sectional area. They're relatively close in the size, only difference by 3 cc's. Same chamber size. Exhaust flow is the exact same. The only real difference is the 235 has a 210 intake valve, 1600 exhaust valve. The 232 has a 2125, 1575 exhaust valve. That and the port design some other things. Really, the shape over the short time, I think, is the biggest. That part I will keep secret because I spent a lot of time and research to do this. I ain't sharing that part. Anyway, we put on the 232s at Gaines. I think, well, I got it written down. And I just quoted wrong, by the way. When the 227s, which were these, are on there, the best with that Victor Jr. made 592 horsepower and 556 torque. When we put the 232s on, so the bigger head, it went 595, 555. When we did that, remember I told you about the 4 eyebrow relief pistons? This part, if you watch the videos, you'll see this. When I saw that, I was like, crap, there's no way this is fitting. Because this head is a 208 intake valve, the 227 that they would run. It clears. The 2125, I was like, that ain't, these are stock replacements, essentially, pistons. They're just hypertetic. There's no way they're going to clear. And I told Bob that. I was like, I don't think it's going to clear. He's like, well, let's mock it up. So we mocked it up, put clay, and it's like, yeah, this is so tight, it ain't going to work. So Bob gets out a Dremel, and he hand relieves every one of the valve notches. And we're like, it looks good. It looks good. And we put it back on there. So even doing that, the bigger head, so this is important because it plays a part later. From the 227 to the 232, the 232 gained 1 horsepower and lost 1 foot-pound of torque. But over the curve, it was better. Remember that, because this is important. So that 232 was better in the entire range, except for 1 peak torque down. It was better over the entire range. And especially, and this part's the one that's the most shocking, and now that's 3 engines, all of them did the same thing. From about 3,000 to 3,500, the bigger the head, the more torque it made. And that range. And that goes against everything you read on the internet, that garbage. But anyway, strange coincidence. In that range, bigger head makes more torque. Maybe that's the reason why the LS3 has such a large head. Because if you're cruising that range, you actually probably do make more torque with that bigger port. You lose it, though, between 4,000 and 4,500, you're down a little bit. And then obviously at the peak, it gains. But anyway, back to what happened. So upon doing that, the goal was next thing we were going to do, because I really wanted to see the difference between the 232 and the 235. That's my real reason for being, I really wanted to see the difference. So we were going to change heads and put the 235 on the 406. We take it off, and I look, and we look at the valve piston reliefs. 3 hit hard. The valves actually made contact with the pistons, even though he had clearanced it. Hit hard. 3 of them hit pretty good. I think 2 others, they were making love. They were kissing, but they weren't hitting it. Regardless, we're like, this ain't smart. We'd have to remove some more material that would just stop. And Bob, that's when Bob says, we're going to do my 427 anyway. Why don't we just change heads on it? And that is the reason why you saw so much testing with the 427, because of Bob. Bob was nice enough to do that. I was like, Bob, are you sure? Because this is going in his Nova. His street car, have a good time car, great car, right? And he goes, and I love Bob. Here's the biggest thing I could tell you to teach you right now. And I know you're getting tired of me gabbing. If you want to get better at anything, surround yourself with people that make you better. And what I mean by that is they strive to make you a better person and better in whatever you're doing. And that's Bob. Whoever gets around Bob, he tries to make them better. And that's a rare breed in people, period. Most people really want to make themselves better. Screw you. Bob is one of the rare breeds where he'd prefer if you were better. Very giving in that way. So I was very shocked. I was like, and he said, yeah, just use my 427. I was like, I was telling him I was worried about it. He goes, there's nothing on that engine that can't be fixed in this machine shop. Nothing. We'll be fine. Once he did that, things started rolling fast. And there's a reason why things kind of went different. The thing you need to know, which you didn't know, this is behind the scenes, the 427 wasn't together. So when I show up, the short block for the 427, that's Bob's, is together. Bill's had been, but the rods were hitting the cam, so Bob had to take the rods out, put a shorter, the stroker clearance rods in there so it would clear. He's doing that. Both of the short blocks are only together with no pans on them, no oil pans or anything else. So There's a lots of moving parts, and if you were there, you'd be like, I don't know how you guys did it. We didn't ever sit down before this thing started and said, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, the plan. None of us did that. And somehow every one of us knew exactly what needed to be done in the right amount of time, and it worked out perfectly. So as the heads were coming off, I should also point out the heads that were going on the 427 and the 434 bills were not assembled. So they're still there, not assembled. So as the 406 is on the dyno, we find out, we can't really do the test on 235. Bob offers up his 427. It's not together. It's essentially the short block, except for oil pump and stuff, is not there. We start doing things. So what happens at this point, this is the reason why you might see certain people on camera with the things and certain not. Gavin, who's the helper for Bob, and if you see him in the videos, you got to give him credit, and I'm going to tell you this too, all right? One of the greatest things we did all week had nothing to do with motors at all. Zero to do with the motors. Switching heads and all that stuff, cool. The greatest thing we did all week was teaching Gavin. So Gavin's 24 years old. He was a graduate from UNOH. So good job on what you guys have done. Whenever people disrespect the younger generation, you're looking at the wrong people. Gavin's 24 years old. He does pit crew stuff for a road course team, and then he works at Bob's. He works literally all the time. When 5 o'clock hit, he didn't go, well, I'm out, see you guys. Never did that. He stuck around every day because he wanted to be there. He wanted to do that. When you talk about hard working, Gavin's a hard worker. Bob, you did a fantastic job of finding him. But do not disrespect the younger generation of their work ethic because you're looking at the wrong people. Gavin is a hard worker, but the greatest thing we did all week was show him different things and learn things. So us, cool, but he got to experience things he probably would never have. Otherwise, maybe he would, but anyway, definitely show him some stuff. Greatest thing ever. So back to the point. Gavin and Austin would take off the engine off the dyno. That does take time. Bob and this guy named Terry. Terry is an important part of this, and he's in my picture, but Terry works for Engine Parts Warehouse, or PBM. He's the parts guy for Bob. He just happened to show up. One of the other amazing abilities of Bob, you show up, he's putting you to work. And it must be his mutant ability. Someone walks in the door, they talk to him for a second, instantly they're working for him. It doesn't matter. So, for instance, Dave shows up to watch some of the stuff. We're draining water out of the block. Dave became the water boy. Here, dump this water. Go take care of this. Go do this. Terry shows up. He's just probably looking to see what's going on, just saying hi to Bob. Nope. He's helping Bob with getting that oil pan on that 427, which, by the way, not the easiest thing. They took some work to get that on there. Part of the reason why it might have leaked. He's taking care of that. So Bob and Terry are working on the 427 to get the pan on. Again, not easy. It sounds easy. You just put the gasket on bolt. You've never assembled an engine if you think it's that easy. It's rare it ever works that way. So they're working on that. I am working on putting together the heads. So I'm putting together the heads. They're taking the engine off, done all that. When the next morning starts, I get there early so we can start. I could button everything up, get the heads on, and put the intake on so we're ready to run on the dyno. And that's how it goes. Remember, Bill's engine still isn't together. So every time we would do stuff, Bob would pill away, Terry would pill away and go work now on Bill's engine. I would get up in the morning to finish off Bill's engine. Like, for instance, I would install the shaft rockers, button everything up, and we would switch over. So there's a lot of in between. Anyway, I only say that if there hadn't been that many people there, this wouldn't have happened. And everybody worked really well together, even Austin. So you might say, well, I didn't see Austin in it. Austin really, he did take apart stuff, but the biggest thing, and this is a huge thing, he was our parts bitch. I know I probably shouldn't cuss, but that's what he was. Without him, none of this happens too, because you almost need a bolt bin of push rods and different lengths to make this stuff happen. Because I don't care what you think, like, oh, it's the same push rod length for each one, because the cylinder heads have the same length valve, milled off the same mount, should be the same push rod. Incorrect. I don't know how this happens. With each engine, it's a different push rod, but they are. Same lifters, doesn't matter. We're very, very strange. Anywho, so he's running out and doing parts. So Jegg's warehouse is there, is somewhat close. It's still a 2-hour back and forth. He had to go to Summit, which is a 2-hour drive, then a 2-hour back. He did that too. So a lot of things came together. Anyway, I feel like I rambled too long, but just wanted you to know, this is probably the most. So beside my son, so leave my son and my family stuff, as far as enjoyable stuff, watching him swim is amazing. But as far as experiences in my life where it's brought me the greatest amount of joy, that week is definitely up there. We worked our tails off, but I've never had so much fun in my life. And we cut up and had a good time. No one had an ego. Like I said, Bob's really good about bringing the best out in everybody. And it was fantastic. But I know you want some results, so I'm going to try to give it to you a little bit here. Because this is going to be confusing. One of the questions you're going to ask, why didn't you use certain intake manifolds on the 406 like you did with the 427, 434? Here's the reason why. Or with the 227 really this head. On this 227, its port opening is a 1206. But the Dragon Slayers, which was what Bob bought to use for this, so I didn't give it to him. He actually bought it. And so did Bill. So I didn't give him to Bill either. He actually bought them. They're a 1207 tall. So they're a taller intake port. So if you port match an intake that fits the Dragon Slayers, the port opening will be bigger than the opening on this 227 of mine. So any of the intakes for the Dragon Slayer, if you could physically bolt them on, but it would be at a huge disadvantage because the port opening on the intake's bigger than the head. It would make little to no power. So as we're testing these heads, there's only really 2 intakes we can use, the stock Trick Flow R and the Victor Jr. On the Dragon Slayers, we could test just about everything, except for the Victor Jr. because it's not tall enough, because it's such an old design, it wouldn't seal. So that's important to note. So here we go. Here we tested 4 heads on that 427. So this one is a weird one. So we'll go back to the 406 for just a second. On the 406, the 227 made 592, 556. We bolt the 232 on, the bigger one, and it goes 595, 555. So it gained 3 horsepower and lost 1 foot-pound of torque from the 2. On the 427, I'm expecting we're going to see bigger differences. But here's what happened. When the 235 went on, it made 621, 584. Okay? So we're making more power. Obviously, Bob's engine's bigger. By the way, the camshafts, as far as duration-wise, they're about the same. All these are with that Isky camshaft, by the way. Same camshaft and everything. When I switched from the 235 to the 232 on Bob's, we're now at 625, 586. That's a gain of 4 horsepower and 2 foot-pounds of torque. So that shape and things of the port does help, but only 4 and 2. Even over the range, it was better. But here's the shocker. Bob wanted to try these 227s on his engine, which I was like, nah, they're too small. What a waste of time. I'm glad we tested it. We put these on. These are the least flowing head, the smallest head, whatever. It makes 624 horsepower and 591 foot-pounds of torque. So from the 232, that's the larger head, it lost 1 peak horsepower, but it gained 5 foot-pounds of torque. And it was better over the entire range. And before you're like, well, duh, velocity. If that's the case, then how come it was reversed on the 406? Because on the 406, the bigger head, the 232, made more power and only lost 1 foot-pound of torque. It still lost 1 horsepower from the bigger head, but it had 5 more foot-pounds of torque. So completely switched. So you explain that. When you say velocity, 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 then how come on the one with the higher velocity, the 427, the bigger head was worse, but on the 406 where it had less velocity because it's a smaller engine, the bigger head was better? That should have been reversed. Anyway, here's the next head that gets tested, and this is the caveat. It's the one that was tested where things changed. So on all the heads mentioned so far, they all had the same cam, the same rockers, the same intake, Trick Flow R. When the Dragon Slayers went on, things changed. And yes, I planned to make it the same so we get an equal comparison, but things didn't work out, which I'll get to in a minute. When the Dragon Slayers went on, the first thing that was different was we put on 1:5 rocker ratio. All the rest had 1:6. We eventually, right after that, switched to 1:6 rocker ratio. But the biggest thing is it also had a different intake manifold on it. It had a fully ported AFR 4810. It's not a bad intake, but it's a shorter intake. It's made for hood clearance. It's not a tall one like the Trick Flow R. Anyway, when it goes on there, and this is the closest I can give as a comparison. So with the 1.6, same cam, it makes 622 and 585. So if you look at it, it's down from this head as far as horsepower and torque. So it's down, it's making 1 foot-pound less than the 232. It's making 1 foot-pound of torque more than the 235, 1 horsepower better than 235, but it's not making as much. So it looks like, well, those Dragon Slayers are turds. And this is a little bit of defense. It's apples to oranges at this point because it doesn't have the same intake on. So if we switch the intake, I don't know really what happened. I thought we were going to, so I should back this up. We didn't do the order of operations correctly to make that happen because the very next thing after we switched the 1.6 rockers, we put Daniel Powell's camshaft in. So even if I put the Trick Flow R on that point, the camshaft's different from all the rest. So it's a little bit of an error in my part as far as the testing, but I didn't care necessarily. I mean, I cared, but I can't give you an accurate comparison of that. I just can't. If the intake was the same, maybe we'd get a better idea. So the other thing is the rockers did change. We went from Jessels to Scorpions. So even though they might claim 1.6 rocker ratio, we don't really know. At least if the Jessels were all, let's say they were 1.5, well, they were 1, even though it says 1.6, they were that for all the heads, not on the Dragon Slayers. So there's a little variation. But anyway, I thought I'd share that with you, kind of give you an idea. I will say, here's the biggest takeaway you could probably get from Bob's engine. Biggest takeaway. The cylinder heads, if you notice, like best to worst. Best one was the 227, or no, sorry. The worst one was a 235 making 621 horsepower. The best one was a 232 and made 625 on horsepower. So best to worst torque. Worst torque, 235 at 584. Best torque, 227 at 591. That means the cylinder heads from best to worst of the 4 we tested, and even though the Dragon Slayer we still really have to have an asterisk by it because it's not even the same setup. Best to worst, the difference is 4 horsepower. On torque, best to worst, the difference is 7 foot-pounds of torque. That's nothing, Hartley. It's nothing, right? The biggest thing I could tell you that kind of shows up is this. If your cam's too small, the only thing, cylinder head's great. All you will do, because I figured this out, all you will do with this cylinder head change is from the peak down. So let's say we made, which all of this was at 6,200, which is really, really low RPM. From 6,200 down, changing of the cylinder heads, that's all you get the biggest change below that. Peaks, like I said, they're virtually the same. But below that in the curve, that's where you're seeing differences. That's where you see the bigger differences. If you really want to see a bigger difference in cylinder heads, what we needed was a cam that would spin it up to 7,000. Then the differences would start spreading. But at 6,200, no matter which head you put on, all you're really changing is below that. The curve below that would get really good, especially with the 227, really good. But they both hit the peaks, bam, almost the same peak. Below changed. That's a later video. Anyway, I think I went too long anyway. Sorry for that. But big thanks to everybody that got involved. All right. I hope we get another chance to do this again. So since you stuck around, we'll kind of give you some of the backstory, some more of it. After doing Bill's motor, and the reason why we didn't get the Bill's motor instantly power, which was like great, but I actually thought, man, we got a long, we're gonna climb, keep climbing. Bill's hit 670 or 668 on the, or 664 or something on the first one. We had timing to go 671, and we had a little bit more and make 672. So I'm thinking, we roll in the next day, we're gonna try a different intake. I'm like, all right. By the way, 6,200 RPM, because also its cam's too small. But I'm thinking we're gonna roll in the next day. We're gonna change the manifold, 695, maybe crack 700. 672, 672. And again, same thing, because of the cam, everything below gets better. Peak, same, doesn't matter. And that probably what's happened with the 406 too. That cam only lets so much in. All you will change is below it. That's what we found. So you might bump the peak up a few, but that wasn't it. The only hope I had was he brought an E85 carburetor, and I know Bill was like dying to do it, and we were too. We just got done trying this Dominator with a spacer on it, which is another thing. That gains on Bob's motor, does nothing on Bill's. Again, what? How does it gain 5 on Bob's? Exact same power on Bill's. Whatever. Anyway, we're going to switch to E85 carburetor, and I look back there at the back of the dyno, and there's water just dripping. I'm like, did we drain the block by accident? No, the seal on the back of the dyno, I guess it just said, time's up. I've had enough this week. I quit. And it decided to leak water. So Bob's like, we got to call it, which is great, because if we didn't, I think what would happen is right when it start adding pressure to it, it would have ejected water. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Remember, I'm no Superman. I did race Superboy. You guys, remember, I do not respond to messages on Facebook or Instagram. Best way to get a hold of me is through email. winegardenracing@gmail.com. You guys take care.